My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Opening Up Shop, Practical Advice for Starting Your Craft Beverage Production Business, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. We are recording today's presentation, and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Virginia SBDC Craft Beverage Assistance Program Manager, Chris Van Orden.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this conversation about the process of launching a craft beverage production business here in Virginia. As Sheila said, my name is Chris Van Orden. I'm the manager of the Craft Beverage Assistance Program at the Virginia SBDC at George Mason University. The CBA program is designed to provide industry-specific assistance to Virginia's craft beverage sector. So today we're going to be looking into the considerations required at opening a craft beverage business with someone who's successfully done so multiple times. You're going to be able to enter questions in the Q&A function. Again, not the chat, the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer all of them either during or after the webinar. So I'm very excited to welcome my guest today, Greg Fleehart, an award-winning professional brewer with over 15 years experience in Washington State and here in Virginia. He's built out and operated multiple breweries and has consulted for successful startups, bringing expertise and an eye for efficiencies and quality. Currently, he's working on opening Old Rappahannock Brewing in Warsaw, Virginia, and continues to consult with small to medium-sized breweries on quality, process efficiencies, and brand development. Today, I'll be asking Greg to give his insights into the launch process. Welcome, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris, and thanks for having me, Sheila.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time. This is great to hear straight from the horse's mouth what it takes to get a business open. So
doing it right now.
yeah. All the more appreciate you taking your time, because I know that you are in the thick of it. But just kind of before we dig into some of the particulars here, can you give us just a little bit of your personal background working with and for breweries, especially in this launch phase?
Yeah, so I started brewing, a home brewer at home, like a lot of people start in the career. Got obsessed with it, and then kind of shouldered my way into a brewing position out in Washington State where I was, and just kind of grew and rose through the ranks there, and then got a brewmaster position, and really did expansion was probably the biggest thing I did in Washington State. And then I moved out to Virginia to start Commonwealth Brewing Company with Jeremy, and so I was there for about 2.5 years, got that off the ground, and helped build that out, which was a 20-barrel, pretty large scale production facility. And then got a chance to do small pub brewing with Amber Rocks Precarious up in Williamsburg, and that kind of got super popular and got out of control. And we built a second location, and so built that out, and that was a really cool concept and still is. And those guys are still doing amazing things, as is Commonwealth. And then did sales actually for a couple of years in malt. So I sold malt to breweries, and did some consulting during that time too. And in Virginia, and mostly Virginia. I did some in Washington State when I was over there as well. And then, got the chance to build out a new production facility for Honor Brewing Company. And that was the biggest one I've ever done. That was like something like 30,000 square feet and 30-barrel system. So we got them, tidied up. And then Andy from Old Rappahannock asked me to, come in and kind of start their brewery up and be the head brewer. So that's what we're working on right now. We're putting together a 10-barrel brew house and a pizza kitchen, and in Warsaw, Virginia, which will be, the community is super excited about it. They really want more craft beer, more options for food. So we're excited to bring that to the table.
That's very exciting. Yeah, it's cool to be able to see all these projects through from kind of conceptualization all the way through reality, yeah. And especially to hear you've worked for companies of all sizes, right? Some of these things are transferable, but a fully taproom model to large scale production and distribution business. It's a different
Yeah.
game you're playing. So it's
It's
helpful
quite
that you're,
different.
yeah, seeing it from multiple angles here. So today's conversation, right, we're really kind of talking about the experience of turning an idea into a real and operating business, right? It's easy to dream, right? You might be able to see specific parts of it, but there's a lot of process involved. So in your experience, how do you like to organize a launch and kind of build out timelines, right? There's a lot of things that need to get done. How do you organize your thoughts when you're ready to start mobilizing?
I think one of the it's essentially a project management question, right? So I think people with project management backgrounds do really well in starting a brewery. Jeremy Biggie at Commonwealth as a project manager, mostly for software, but he had a really good eye for that. So he had a really good eye for timelines and keeping things on track. So if you have someone in your group that is has project management experience, that can be really beneficial. I think also you can't necessarily work backwards from a certain start date. So I think a lot of people will be like, I want to open August 1st of 2024. And then they work their way backwards. And that's a good starting point. But really you're gonna want to build from where you are and then project out and give yourself enough buffer time to be realistic. A lot of people will run out of cash and have to get additional funding or additional investors because that timeline just keeps expanding. So I think it's really beneficial to get your general contractor in place, get any consultancies that you're going to hire in place, surround yourself with the right people, get those timelines moving from where you are now to where the project could be completed. And then you want to give yourself buffers in between all those steps because things will inevitably be delayed. Shipping will be delayed. Production will be delayed on your brew house. You'll run into big problems with your water meter or water main or gas or whatever it is, utilities or construction, or your contractor or subcontractor could say, yeah, it'll only take us 2 weeks. Well, that's 2 weeks in their time, which is 2 weeks on site, but they have 5 other jobs, so really it's 10 weeks. So really getting a realistic and expanded timeline, put those buffers in there because you'd rather have a longer period of time that you're funded before you run out of cash and then deliver in a smaller period of time and you have more working capital for when you're actually operating.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of the story of is right the sort of burn rate of your capital in the beginning,
Yeah.
right? All this, yeah, there's time, it can be frustrating, all that stuff, but it's very important to closely track these timelines so that how much do you need to raise, right? If you're delayed another month, well, you don't want to be suddenly kind of underwater if you're have to pay a lease, right? Some of this comes down to the negotiation on the front end, like when do you start paying on that property? There are things that you can kind of do to try and hold people, either to task or get more beneficial terms on your part. But at a certain point, you just need to make sure that you're not operating so close to the bone that one bump in the road, because there are going to be bumps in the road. I mean, you mentioned, I don't know, 5 or 6, and I'd say those are pretty common, but the only guarantee is that it's not going to hold to the timeline you projected.
Yes. I think the closest I ever got to opening on time was, I think it was only 2 months off of the original projected date, which I was like, hell yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's probably best case scenario. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. I think when people are putting together these plans is that, you may need to fund yourself for twice as long as you anticipate, and better to be overfunded and to have that working capital or give it back than to be underfunded and have to scramble.
Yeah, you can always find more things to spend on if you need to, or
Yeah.
give that money back to certain people. But I think, and I liked your point about, right, you can kind of have a date, it might be 2 years out that you're looking, okay, you said August 1st, whatever it might be. But really taking stock of where you're at in terms of the resources you have and the team you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that if you have these talents in-house or if you are closer to the capital providers, you might be faster in this area, whereas this area might be a little bit slower. You might wind up having to spend more time convincing your municipality. You mentioned that your brewery right now, you have really good support in the local community, which is great, but not everybody does. So you might have to spend a little more time on that. So when people ask, well, how long does it take to open a brew pub? It seems like a cheat, right? Oh, I want to open a 30 barrel production brewery. I want to open a winery, distillery. How long is it going to take me? It depends, right?
Yeah.
You need to know who, where, how, what that's going to look like, and
Yeah.
start
And
building it.
sometimes you won't exactly know until you start digging into it, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you don't, unearth anything physically, but it happens. There's all kinds of surprises there. So,
Yeah.
we mentioned, talking a little bit about the sort of different types of businesses that are going to be there, right? And you have everything from a small taproom only model. You might have a kitchen. You might have, some distribution in your business, whatever that might be. Huge and expanding range of models available to producers. If you're working with a client, right? Obviously, like when you're setting up a company yourself, you have your own internal logic for it. But if somebody's coming to you for guidance and they're trying to, determine exactly what they want, how is their vision going to play out? How do you help them confirm that their model fits the market and that they have everything they need to actually deliver that model?
Yeah. So I think that's a really important thing to do, is to get somebody on your team, either on a consulting basis, someone who's been in the industry for a while, who has the finger on the pulse. So, there's lots of resources out there. There's, podcasts and webinars, and there's the Brewers Association will come out pretty much every month with a new kind of report that shows you where the trends are going. And it's not necessarily like, oh, hazy IPAs are popular again. That's, not not the trends I'm talking about. But in terms of like on premise, off premise,
Mm-hmm.
what shelf consolidation, where RTDs and seltzers are. So where craft beer sits in the overall beverage market, where craft beer is in terms of total production, openings and closings. So there's a lot to kind of navigate in that. And, I live in that world. So it's easier for me to take a look at somebody's goals and vision and be like, yes, you are in line with what's happening right now, and I think you're poised to do success in the future. Or maybe, this is ambitious. You're going to need a lot of funding. You're not going to make money for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a certain kind of talent on your team to make it executable. So I think getting the perspective of someone that's kind of got their pulse on the industry is really important. And to, just kind of see what people are drinking and what people want, and what the environment is looking like.
Yeah, yeah. It can be hard to read the tea leaves. I mean, this is
Yeah.
just one of the things that's just inherent to the industry, is that the consumer behavior shifts far more rapidly than people's business models can pivot, right? You make an
Right.
investment, you might have a 10-year horizon to really be operating at full capacity. Well, the industry has turned over 3 times since then. Sure, right. There's always
Right.
a little bit of a leap of faith, but at the same time, that due diligence, looking to expertise to get a sense of macro trends and being able to clearly say, right? I mean, if you're planning on opening a business, and you need to be able to answer, well, why you, why here, why this model, right? If you just say, I'm passionate about it, well, certainly investors may not be swayed by that, but it's a good time to stop down and say, all right, well, let's put the work in here, because you might find, hey, a few fine-tune adjustments are going to get you in a much better position to succeed. It's
Yes. Yes. And there's a great book by Simon Sinek called Start with Why.
mm,
And it's a pretty popular one. But if you're looking to start a business, really of any type, but a craft beverage business, I think that's a really good place to start, because it's a really saturated market right now. It's a difficult market. And you got to be different. You got to have a real reason for existing. You can't just necessarily like beer and want to make beer. You got to have something else that's a little deeper than that. So that book is a really good guide map to kind of building that why. Why does this exist? What are you bringing in the community? What are you bringing to the people that are going to be your customers? And I think that's important. And also, hospitality is probably the biggest differentiator now, and the most important thing. Hospitality and marketing. I think those are the two big things that every brewery needs to focus on and invest money into.
yeah, yeah. It's the experience, right? What are people buying into? Obviously, I mean, at a certain point, quality just it's a given now, right? There's
Yeah,
plenty
it's
of
a baseline. You can't be successful without quality
yeah.
anymore.
But that's not enough. It used to be, right? 10, 15 years ago, quality will eventually win out. People will find it. There
Yeah.
just wasn't so much product out there. But
Yeah.
no matter what space you're in, unless you're doing something really esoteric where I want to be Virginia's leading maker of schnapps, hey, great. I would love to see it.
Right.
Personally, that's great. But then you're starting with a different kind of problem you're trying to tackle, which is building an audience. If you're
Right.
in beer, wine, spirits, and to a slightly lesser extent, cider, it's a very well-defined space,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
what is it? Why are you the people to do it? Is there a market here? Is there something that you're going to carve out? Are you winning new market? Are you winning over new customers to this category? This is just doing the exercises clarifying for yourself, but it's really helpful to be able to convey that story to other people because you're going to have to convince a lot of people when you're going through all of this, right?
Yeah.
People on your own team, if you're trying to hire people, if you're trying to get the town to sign off on something, well, hey, this is why this is going to work. Um,
Yeah.
is really helpful.
I think that's a really good point. I think your point about the schnapps thing was niche markets and markets that don't necessarily exist at the level that or aren't as mature, or niche new markets. Even if it's like a blue ocean kind of strategy, those are the most work. Those are the most risky, and those are the most effort. And you have to have a diverse team to make sure that that can go through. And it still might not. The
Mhm.
reward could be much bigger than entering an existing mature market, uh, but it's definitely more of a gamble. And you probably need a lot more funding and probably something in the venture capital realm to make that happen.
Yes, totally. And it's an exciting space to be, but I feel like, that's the risk reward balance, right?
Yeah.
There's none of this is a given. It's all hard, but if you like operating kind of at the margins, then doing something a little more specific, a little more on the vanguard, there's still room. There's still
Yes.
many, many things to be, whether it's the new product or a new model or a new whatever it might be, right? There's all kinds of twists to be had, but at
Yeah.
this point, we're pretty mature here. So a
Yes.
couple of times now you've mentioned kind of having a team, right?
Mhm.
This is no matter what model you're looking at here, even if we're doing something, a brewery, a 3-barrel brewery, or just, a very small farm winery, whatever it might be, there's going to need to be more than one person, right? Even if there's one person driving the process, there's going to be people involved and it takes a team. So what kind of players or talents do you want to see represented on a launch team? What are some of the ones that you might be able to look outside of your formal group for? Can you just talk about what that building a team looks like in your experience?
Yeah. So I think, if you're the owner and the founder of this company, you're going to have that nugget of why. You're going to know why you're doing this. You're going to know the mission. You're going to know the goals. You're going to have these things fully fleshed out. Yeah, hopefully. Right. And it's a living document. It might change as you encounter things, but really you're going to be orchestrating the whole thing. And so you want to bring on someone who has, for instance, if you're going to be in the brew pub space, let's say
Mm.
for sake of argument, you need to have someone on your team that is uh, dedicated to hospitality, lives and breathes that. That needs to be a priority, and that doesn't have to be a hire right away, but that needs to be something that is well thought out, well paid, and you need to recruit the best for that. That will pay itself off in no time whatsoever.
Mm.
And then also marketing. You need to have either a consulting marketing group or you need to hire somebody full time for marketing, and it's a full time job. My wife does marketing consulting, and there's a lot to it. It's not as simple as making a good Instagram post. It's a whole strategy unto itself. And a good marketer will know how to build that strategy around your goals and your mission. And you cannot survive without marketing nowadays, especially in this marketplace. You cannot. You need good marketing, and that brings people in the door. It'll pay itself off, and a good marketer will know how to quantify that for you. So you will see the results of your money, on paper in results, graphs, charts, whatever you want to see it. They'll be able to provide that for you. So very important would be marketing, and then I think when you get a little close in talking about consultancies or subcontractors, your architect's going to be worth their weight in gold, and they are going to build out your facility digitally And then that's going to be submitted, and that's going to be, everything is based on the architecture. And they're going to be able to take your vision and put it into something that looks great, functions well, passes code, passes inspection. The key here is to get an architect that has done your project before in another way, because there is gaps in knowledge from everybody. So you need to have somebody that has done this before, has competence in doing it. They might not be cheap, but it really beats having to pay 40, 50 grand 4 more times down the road when something's not to code and you have to completely redo it. So you're worth, get a good architect, and also talk to your architect and be like, hey, I want to take your plans to another architect for review and make sure that you're not missing anything. Make sure that they're okay with that. I think that's a really valuable step, is just make sure it's sound. And also have your general contractor review it. And general contractor is going to be huge in your construction and build out phase. Obviously, they're going to be orchestrating the whole thing. They've got subcontractors. Make sure they have phenomenal plumber contractor, electrician contractor, and usually they do. But also see if they can get a mechanical contractor, not just HVAC, but commercial mechanical. That is going to be someone who's doing your boiler setup, your burner setup, your glycol chiller setup, your process plumbing for steam, glycol. They're going to be doing a lot of those more specialized things that can cost a lot of money, but also it's very difficult to find a mechanical contractor. A lot of them won't work with, brewery stuff. Some of them haven't at all. So I like to work with people who have done it before. And we're working now with Metro Mechanical, and they think they service most of Richmond, most of Virginia, and they've done tons of breweries. I've worked with them, I think, 3 times now. So they know what they're doing. They know how to set up. They're fast, they're efficient, and they're cost effective. So surround yourself with, good GC, great architect, marketing brain. You want, and then you really want expertise on the production side. So that's where I usually come in, is expertise on the production side. So it's talking about sizing your equipment, vetting manufacturers. Are we going used? Are we going new? What are the limitations of that space? How can we use it for the best of the ability? What does your draft system look like? What kind of contractors do you need in addition? And building your space out virtually so that you can have a great plan. And then also working with you on your model. Like, are you really going to be able to take, if you want 80 taps and it's a town of, 200 people, it's kind of just putting some reality into what you want to do and making sure that you can still execute your vision, but in a way that's going to make you money. Because ultimately you have to make money, and the margins on beer aren't as good as people think.
Yes, it's great until you capture overhead, for sure.
Yes. Staffing, overhead, insurance, repairs, maintenance. Yeah, it gets expensive really quickly. And it's not that you don't make good margins on that 1 pint of beer. Your 1 pint of beer, you could make, thousands of % of profit if you're doing it by that number, but you're still only selling $7 at a time, and maybe 2, 3, 4 max probably per customer. So your ticket, your total ticket is smaller, and your margins are great on it. That's great, but you still need more revenue. So that's when things like, we introduce a food option, one of those, what's fast, what's easy, what's a good margin, and what do you have space for? What do you have? Do you need a hood for that? So there's a lot of considerations in building a good space where you're going to be profitable and have enough revenue to sustain what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, when it comes to the team, there's obviously professionals, especially like licensed professionals. There's things that no founder is really going to do unless they happen to be in that field already.
Yeah.
But a lot of it comes down to people who have been through this before, the rubber meets the road people. Some of it is just providing those gut checks, right? It lives in your head. You might have vast, expansive thing, but you don't know the things you don't know.
Right.
You have spreadsheets everywhere, but somebody that's been through and seen, under the hood of 20 other companies in your space is going to be able to say, that's not going to hold true, right?
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of experts like this. We've had a number of webinars with a regulatory expert who is, has seen dozens, hundreds of licensed operations and where they fall. So, right, somebody like that versus you feeling relatively confident that your model is going to be approved. Well, sometimes it's better to just make sure you have somebody do it beforehand because, right,
Yeah.
like I've
Well,
said this.
sorry, I think there's a really good point is that all these inspectors, everything that you're going to get when you try to get something passed, when you try to get something approved, it's all humans, right? These are all people. So it can vary. You could have the best thing on paper and then someone says, I don't like it, and they don't approve it. So making your argument, making everything you have ironclad, and having people who know, oh yeah, I know this inspector, this is how we're going to have to do it to get it passed. That's so worthwhile. You know, that sort of thing is extremely, to navigate the human element of it is worth its weight for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, you can research all you want, right? You look at the Virginia code and see what it says. Well, there's plenty of room in that code for live reality.
Yes.
That's, that's kind of the stuff where it comes down to precedent, previous interpretations, right? Oh, well, this inspector usually gives the okay if you meet these criteria, that kind of thing. And when you were mentioning the sort of build out side as well, there's, of course, bare minimum is being up to code, but then there's practicality, right? Like, hey, I know that having setting up the system here with the loading bay here, you're just going to wind up having a huge difficulty constantly unloading because you're going to have to back it off the truck and immediately pull a 90-degree turn. Let's maybe reorient the tanks to do this, right? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It can be hard to visualize unless you're that kind of person. So there's the lived experience in addition to just meeting the letter of the law or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this starts pretty early. I wanted to mention something that I saw that you actually shared on LinkedIn just the other day, which is pretty early stage, right? About site selection, right? You might say, okay, I've gone through the steps, I've incorporated, I have starting to think about my capital raise. Like I know generally where I want to be, what my model is. You might start to go look at properties while you're, filing some paperwork. This is a pretty early stage thing. But can you just talk a little bit about, that particular step as just an example of the kinds of considerations a company needs to kind of take as they're going through their checklist?
Yeah, so I think I wrote a little article about this. It's on my LinkedIn, so I'm sure that'll be shared. But it's just LinkedIn's Greg Fleehart. So just look that up. And so what I go through in that paper is fairly brief, but it covers a lot of ground. So square footage is obviously going to be really important, and roughly 150 square feet per barrel capacity on your brew house is kind of minimum. So if you have a 10-barrel brew house, you probably want 1,500 square feet. But that's just production space. That doesn't include storage, cold storage, shipping, receiving space, or like utilities. So like boiler, glycol chiller, all that sort of stuff. Because 1,500 square feet is not huge, but a 10-barrel system that'll give you room to expand a little bit. That'll give you some room to move around because you definitely need to move around in a brewery, get behind stuff to clean it. So there's some square footage considerations. Also zoning, make sure that you're zoned appropriately. If you're looking to do a production only space, light industrial should do the trick. If you're looking to have a food component, there might be some other considerations you have to look for, because rezoning can be a real bear, because you could sign that lease and then go to the town and say, hey, I want to rezone, and you have to have hearings, and people might say, I don't want that in our town. So zoning is probably the one thing I would say is find something that's already zoned where you need to be, so you don't have to change it. That's going to save you a lot of time and headaches. And then you got to look at utilities. You got to look at your power requirements. I always recommend three-phase because most modern brewing equipment is three-phase, and it sometimes costs extra to get it single-phase. So most light industrial will have three-phase run into it. Most restaurant spaces will have it now because of they've got similar equipment processing, motors, pumps, that sort of thing. Then also three-phase, you'll draw less amperage and less amperage because you have an extra lead there. So you've got just more going to it, and it'll your pumps and your motors, their lifespan will be higher. So I think power, make sure you got enough, and make sure you have enough service too, because if you only got like 100 amp service, my glycol chiller itself can be 100 amps. So take all of your equipment that you've gotten from your brew house supplier. If you've already got that scheduled out, or, get a hold of a consultant and say, hey, what do you think I really need? You probably need 200 minimum, but a lot of places can be up to 400. So just make sure you have enough amp service, water. When we opened up Commonwealth, we had a house. It turned out it was in an old fire station, volunteer firehouse. And we figured the water main would be huge because it's a firehouse. But turns out it was just a normal, like, what is it, 3/4 inch line coming into that place. And whoever was in charge of that was like, that's not enough. You can't have that. And we had the technology where we could use that. We could fill up our tanks and use pumps to boost it. But they insisted. And so it was tens of thousands of dollars to tear up that space, put a new line in, new meter, just to satisfy that requirement. So make sure your water line is big enough. I think usually about 1.5 inches is usually pretty good for most applications for small, medium-sized breweries. But that's going to be something you have to talk to your town about, your GC about, and figure out exactly what's going on there. Process flow is going to be really important. So that's where a consultant comes in again, is looking at your space and saying, yeah, as a brewer, I could operate efficiently in this space, or here's some bottlenecks, or, here's a problem. You won't be able to get grain through this space. You're going to have to haul it one by one. That's not feasible for brewer burnout and probably OSHA requirements. And then another one is that has popped up as problematic in the past is gas. So if you're operating a brewery, if you're operating craft beverage, most of the time you're going to need to heat something up. And most of the time, the most efficient way to do that is with a burner system or a steam generator. And those run on either natural gas or propane. Natural gas is usually hard-lined in, and most things are already fitted for natural gas. But if you're in a smaller town like we are in Warsaw here, there's no natural gas service. So everything's propane. And you run into problems because liquid propane is all about, you have to have a certain amount of headspace to get the amount of BTUs out of it. So most applications, most of the time for a brewery, even a small one, you'll probably end up needing 1,000-gallon tank. And those have their own problems. You have to be 25 feet away from everything. You can sink them into the ground if you want to, but you have crash protection. So I would recommend, if it's all possible, make sure you have natural gas service to the building, because you'd be surprised you could be next door to someone who has natural gas, but it might not be to your building. And it's sometimes the natural gas company will actually do that hookup for you because they're going to be receiving that revenue. So they'll do most of the work for you. But that pushes you back weeks and weeks and weeks, because they've got to get permits. They got to tear up a road. They got to, have people out there guarding things. So it's really make sure that you have gas, and make sure that you have equipment where you don't have to have 5 or 6 of these 1,000-gallon tanks.
Yes, goodness. And it's like, I wanted to highlight this just as an example of the kind of thing where, hey, if you don't have this kind or level of expertise on your team, there are people out there for this stuff. This is how deep you need to go on all of these issues, right? Then it's right, knowing everything from just, hey, how gas companies work, and that you can have these conversations with them. You need to actually be able to go look at maps that, to be able to see if you're in a service area or not. All this stuff, right? Knowing the questions to ask and how to get the right answers and what those answers mean. And it's fine if it's not internal to your team. You might say, hey, I am a industry agnostic project manager. I bring in talent for any given area. I'm here for this front, or I come from a sales perspective, or I'm a hospitality person. I need to bring in this other expertise. That's fine. It's better to know yourself and know which areas that you aren't able to cover yourself or with your existing team. Learning on the fly is not something that you can do all that easily, and certainly not something to do on your own dollar. It's
no, and you need times of the essence with these things. So you could do all the research you want, but that takes time.
Yeah.
But or you could hire somebody who could get it done quicker, get it done smoother, and you'll learn along the way, because you'll see what they're doing. They'll explain it to you. So it's kind of like if you hire a consultant, you're investing in your own edification, really. Too.
Yeah. Once you've been through it, you've learned that much. But hey, you might as well get it right. So speaking about this, right, sort of not being sort of penny wise, pound foolish here, right? It's no matter what, this is going to be expensive. This is not a cheap industry here. There's lots and lots of variables. We talked about all the different models and kind of things that go into building out timelines and costs. But in general, what are some of the cost centers that you see founders typically experiencing the most overruns, the one that they most consistently underestimate?
I think utilities is probably the biggest one. So utilities needing to upgrade the water line, needing to tie in a new water main, natural gas, propane, setting those things up, making adjustments because utilities aren't where they need to be, maybe ordering new equipment. I think utilities is probably one of the bigger ones. Parking is a big one too that people don't think about, but sometimes, you want to open up a restaurant, you want to have 150 seats, but the city comes in and says, well, you need to have X amount of parking spaces per your total square footage. And so you just can't have that big of a restaurant space. So there's some considerations there, I think, that people that either lose out on revenue, or they have to make drastic changes to their plan that costs a lot of money to do that. And like we talked about earlier, funding, you're gonna make funding for that period of time when you are starting up, not just to pay your contractors and all the application fees and all those sorts of things, but if you're bringing on consultancies, if you're hiring a brewer, if you're hiring a brewer for the last 4 to 6 months of build out to make sure that they know when that brew house goes into place, that they're helping putting together, they're developing your lineup, your recipes, they're vetting out vendors for things like brewing software, or setting up all your vendors like hop suppliers, malt suppliers. If you get to that point and you're like, oh man, we're still not going to be able to brew for 2 more months, you still are going to have to pay that salary. So that, I think, that extension of the construction build out phase and waiting for your general occupancy permits, waiting for just being able to open your doors, that usually costs owners more than probably anything else. It gets nickel and dimed. So I think that's another reason why I recommend hiring a brewery consultant, is you're paying for the hours they put in. You're not having to have someone on salary and benefits, and then all of a sudden you can't open, and you're like, oh man, well, I've got this person, I got to keep paying them, and they're just sitting around literally just doing this. I've had a friend that I consulted with, and he was super gung ho. I actually connected him and the brewer, and he was super excited, hired her. It was fantastic. And then they were delayed by another 5-6 months. So she was on salary and benefits for a year, when really it should have been probably max 6 months. So putting the cart before the horse, right? You could pay, quarter to a half of the total cost of a salary for that 6-month period for a consultant. And you're going to get expertise from somebody who's done it a bunch. And then they're going to make your head brewer super happy because they put together a brewery that any brewer would want to brew in. You know what I mean? And you could hire the best brewer in the world, but if they've never opened up a brewery before, they might not know what to look for or to do either. So you're basically setting them up for success. You got a happy brewer, someone who wants to be there a long time. And that's important too. Brewer burnout is real, and it's a tough industry. It's a tough job. So, hiring somebody who knows what it's like and where the pain points are for a brewer, give them the best chance of having a great time at work and making good products.
Yeah. I think that, paying for that outside expertise, right? People like, oh, I'm going to bring it in-house. This is great. I want to, of course, on a per hour basis, yes, it looks like a good value proposition, but you're not accounting for downtime and benefits, and you're paying for deliverables with consultants. Not to say that it's always smooth, right?
Right.
But being thoughtful about what you want to bring in-house, what you want to rely on outside experts for, right? It doesn't have to be all one or the other. Thinking about that, those timelines, you have your timeline, you build in all those buffers, and you say, well, I don't really need to hire this person until this point, because then there's enough for them to do, right? This is when they're going to be needed. And yeah, you might have a production lead in mind, right? Your head brewer, your head winemaker wants to be on board from the beginning, but if there's 6 months that they're going to be on board working 5 hours a week, that's not a good investment. It's just hey,
Yeah, it
that
really isn't.
you want this company to survive. I think a good, team member is going to recognize that, hey, I'd rather have a job for 5 years than get 6 extra months and have it fold in a year because we ran out
Yeah,
of.
absolutely. And then, that I would also recommend that if you have someone in mind and they are gainfully employed and they're okay there for a while, you could still, unless they have a non-compete, which I think don't hold up anymore, but you can ask them to consult. So you could come up with a baseline pay for them to consult, and maybe it's once a week. You're sending them a project and they're spending a couple hours on it, and then you're just, you're basically using them as a consultant. So if that's the case, then I think that's also a good way to go. I think it's not meaning that you can't also hire another brewery consultant to do
Mhm.
maybe a little more of the tedium, a little more of, the gritty work,
Mhm.
before your brewer gets there.
Yeah, that's an interesting, doing this sort of convertible consultant model. It's kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times
Um,
I've seen it a bunch of times where it's, a brewer like myself doing consulting stuff. They end up consulting for the brewery, and then they're like, "Hey, you want to come work for us?" And they're like, "Sure." So they end up being the head brewer anyway.
yeah. I mean, who knows better? But yeah, it's a nice way to preserve funds, and I think everybody winds up happier for it. Um,
Yeah.
so we've obviously talked a lot about production here, since that's an area that you tend to lead on or oversee when you're working on opening up breweries. Um, just can you talk again a little bit? We talked a little bit about kind of like site issues, but what should kind of producers and planning be thinking about when they're setting up their production space, besides like the sort of building itself?
Yeah, so process flow is really important. So making sure that you can ship and receive, without any interference. So making sure that it's not, there's not a parking space right in front of your loading door, so you can only ship and receive when there's not a car there. So it seems simple, but a lot of people don't even think about that. And then, making sure that your floors are great. Like honestly, there's not a lot of people put money into their floors. And when they don't, it costs them so much more in the long run. So I think that's something to put in your financial plan and your request for funding right away. Go to someone like Cascade Floors. They're going to do all your epoxy. They're going to slope everything. You're going to have a much cleaner brewery, a better smelling brewery, and a brewer who's not going to have to squeegee for 2 hours a day. So when
Hmm.
you don't do that for your floors, I mean, I've spent at least an hour a day squeegeeing a floor when there's not a slope floor. And that is a waste of your brewmaster's time. It's a waste of anybody's time to
Hmm.
squeegee. And it leads to burnout. I mean, if you have to squeegee every day for an hour, it's like it gets to be ridiculous. And it's also resentment. You're like, wow, my owner's cheap. They didn't, put the 80 grand into the floor like they should have.
Hmm.
So that's where again the brewery consultancy can come in and say, wow, this is going to make the best possible environment for your brewer to work in. And so I think investment in infrastructure, so investment in your floors, your drains, making sure you're getting a brew house that functions well. There's a ton on the market right now that are used. So don't be afraid of used stainless. You might have to replace motors, maybe pumps, seals, gaskets, but a good brewery consultant can go out there and check it out for you and make sure you get a good deal. I saw like a
Yeah.
4 vessel 30 barrel go for like 5 grand the other day.
Whoa.
And that's probably $500,000 new. So at least, and then, you're going to pay more in shipping and rigging than you are for
Yeah.
what you actually paid for it. But that's a great deal.
You get a good set of eyes on it to figure out what needs to be replaced
Yeah.
component wise. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's,
Stainless is stainless as long as it's not corroded out, which is pretty rare.
yeah.
It's a pretty good deal. And technology for brew houses for basics of brewing has not changed a lot in the last probably 20 years.
Hmm.
There's bells and whistles for sure. There's efficiencies that can be made, but you can also like retrofit, you can add. So you don't have to, you can get an older brew house and then soup it up later.
Yeah,
So,
that is one of the few areas where conditions have become more favorable over time, right? It's a more
yes.
competitive market. None of this is getting any cheaper, but there's just more systems on the market, even in the secondary market, that's just chalk it up and, on the
Yeah.
plus side of the ledger
And
here.
breweries are closing. Like I just saw a friend of mine posted that there's a brewery in Charlotte that they're closing they don't want to have the branch anymore. It's a branch of another brewery. They don't want to deal with it, but I think it's at least a 10-barrel system. And it's got everything already built out. It's already ready to go. And it's only like $200,000. You can't get a new brew house for $200,000. So there's opportunities out there. I think that's where really there's a gold mine. If you have a great team, you've got a great vision, you've got good people around you and talent, there are breweries that are ready to be bought and operated. Change the branding, change the messaging, get it. That's just all superficial stuff, right? And that doesn't cost a lot. So if your infrastructure is already gone, you can pay $200,000 for an operating brewery. You're going to be making money at day one practically. So, and that's a great way to go in this environment now.
Yeah. If it's the right fit, hey, there's
Well,
solutions out there.
if that location is good too. I think that's
Yeah.
something that you really got to look and make sure you got
Yeah.
good, driving in and out. You got good parking. You've got good foot traffic, and you've got enough disposable income in the area that they're going to show up. Yeah, I think, and there's also something to be said for using somebody else as a proof of concept. So we're lucky here in Warsaw that Andy during COVID opened up Old Rappahannock Tap House, and it's been successful. It's been very successful. It's like the go-to place for casual dining. There are other restaurants that have done pretty well. So that's a good litmus test to say, yeah, there's room for a craft beer brewery here. I think we have enough customers that want to come in and spend money on beer and pizza. So use the market around you, use your competitors as a litmus test to say, is this area going to support what we're doing? And if there's been tons of restaurant turnover in that section, you might not be in the best section.
Yes. Important to know. And, even though sometimes it doesn't feel great to buy that, second, if it's somebody outgrew it, great. The company folded. Well, remember you're providing a solution rather than having that go up just at general auction or being piecemealed out. It's if they're trying to retire that, like you're actually helping by providing capital, right? This stuff has a useful life and they get the cash, even if it's, a fraction of what they paid for it initially.
Yeah.
So,
And they've already probably recouped their initial investment plus some. So you're just giving them a cash bonus at the end.
yeah, just, there's no, this industry, there was not a lot of thought as to, succession plans or what's the end game.
So a little anecdote about that. Legion Brewing Company out in Seattle, where I'm from, a stalwart of independent brewing for decades. And there was a founding member. I think there was three or four founding members. One of them was Dick Cantwell, who was the brewmaster. He's in charge of all the beer. Probably one of the most humble, brilliant people you ever meet in your life. And I had a chance to sit with him for a little bit. And this was right after they got bought by Anheuser-Busch, and it just rocked the whole craft beer scene in general, but especially in Seattle area. They people that knew Dick Cantwell, and he was staunchly about independence, staunchly anti, Anheuser-Busch. But they got purchased, and what happened was his partners wanted a retirement plan. They wanted it out, but they had never discussed and never developed an exit strategy that was in line with their vision. And they had just built out this beautiful new production facility. And AB and Bev was like, all right, you guys are poised to do good things. You already put this investment in. We want to take over. We want to put more money into it. We want to use our distribution network to put your beer everywhere. And they offered him a pretty penny, and the owners voted against him because he was like, I don't want to sell to these guys. But they said, you're outvoted. So have a contingency, have an exit strategy in place, and have an agreement between your partners to make sure that it doesn't get ugly at the end. Because he got a bonus, and Dick got a bonus and stuff, but he had to stay on for a year as a consultant for them. And from what I remember him telling me, it kind of broke his soul to work for the big guys.
Yeah, it's not the thing to be thinking about, or not easy to be thinking about that when you're in the launch phase. You have all of these visions for what it's going to be, but right, having that conversation with your partners so that you are all on the same page, because it might be 10 years from now, but especially if you're sharing equity or part of your raise is associated with giving up points of equity, like, well, you don't want to be trying to address those issues in real time, because it
Right.
could be very painful. You get lawyers involved, everybody loses, money in that situation. So,
Have that in your business plan, have that in your articles of incorporation,
yeah,
and then revisit it annually at your annual meeting, discuss it. It's like, are we all on the same page here still with our exit strategy? If an offer comes along, what are the criteria for selling?
mhm,
And what's our minimum that we're going to need to recoup? And is that realistic in the marketplace right now? These are
yeah.
all good things to keep that conversation flowing.
Well, I know you've seen lots of different things here, with your own personal experience working with other companies, obviously, yeah, friends and colleagues in the industry. Without naming any names, I'm not asking you to air any dirty laundry here, but what are some of the most common pitfalls that you find companies experience when they're trying to get their doors open? And if you have one of the stranger ones, I think it's helpful for people to kind of get a sense of, there's the surprises that they're going to come their way, right? This is no matter what, it's not going to be perfectly smooth. So what are some of those
I
hurdles?
think the I think the biggest model that maybe is the most, there's always the most surprises, is building a facility from the ground up. So from dirt, essentially.
Hmm.
Even if someone else is building it for you and you're going to rent from them, there's too many surprises that come up. Again, with permitting, with fuel, with water, with electrical, that sometimes you'll have to end up paying for. So maybe, I think this happened with a friend of mine that I consulted with, and it just kept building up. It kept building up in time. It kept building up. It was out of their control, um, and so it ended up extending their timeline for opening, and costing them more money than they wanted to spend. So, building from the ground up, if you have a lot of funding and a lot of time, then that can be a really great way to do it, because you get everything you want. Right? You can build it
Hmm.
exactly how you want it. I would recommend that if you don't have an extensive capital and you want a quick timeline, purchase an existing brewery or an space that has all utilities that you need in what capacity. I think that's probably the biggest pitfall, is building from the ground up. Timing, as we talked about, hiring people too early, that happens a lot. People,
Hmm.
there's like, oh, I need a brewer. I need this advice. I need that mind in my team, which is true. But, a year of salary and benefits for a brewery for something that's not making revenue, doesn't make any sense. And
Hmm.
it's getting more expensive to hire brewers. Our cost of living has gone up incredibly. The housing market's insane, and wages have not really risen to inflation. So it's going to cost you a good amount to get a talented brewer,
Hmm.
and someone that's going to stick around and be able to live off that salary. So, um, I would say hiring people too early, building from the ground up, and just not getting the right team together. Not having front of house experience on your team, not having hospitality, which is folded into front of house experience, not really having a marketing mindset. You have to market your brand now. And it's not just about, again, not about just advertising. It's not about social media presence. It's about engagement. It's about networking. A good marketer is also a great networker. So they will go out and network on your behalf to get people interested in your product and in your space. Like my wife, again, is a marketer. One of her strengths is that she goes out and she goes to chamber of commerce events. She goes to presentations, and she networks on behalf of these businesses. And that is probably the most return on your investment, and the best, was it customer turnover. So, for every one person you talk to, it's probably about every two people you talk to, one of them is actually probably going to buy or help your business in some way. When you're
Hmm.
talking about something like direct mail, advertising, social media, it's in the hundreds to one.
Yeah.
So in terms of, and a good marketer, good networker can go out there and kind of pick who might actually be a good person to be a partner or be a customer. Um, so getting a marketing mind on early, I think, is better than anything else, really. Make sure you have that marketing, someone who can drive that marketing train and get people through your door.
Yeah. Yeah. It's people get often very excited about the brand or the product, and that's part of it. And it's, sometimes people are so focused on that they don't forget about the nitty-gritty side of things. But
Yeah.
right, in the end, you're trying to win an audience, and it might not be just a logo and brand names, but right, well, what's the story you're telling? How are you convincing people to
Yeah.
get on board with what you're doing? And that
Yeah.
takes effort, it takes expertise. And of
Yeah.
course, as with everything, it takes money. This is the reality of it. None of this stuff is free, but you will see the ROI if you're being smart about, who you're assembling on your team to get to launch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spend the money up front. Don't be shy. Get your funding. Make sure you have it all in your funding requests. You will get, if you have this good team, if you've got good consultancies, if you've got great marketing, you'll make it all back. And you'll make your money back faster when you open than you would have if you didn't have those people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good closing note, but before I let you go, is there anything else that we didn't touch on today that you think producers of planning should keep in mind?
I think something that we touched on just briefly, I think is, we can't assume that quality is going to get you success. And we also need to understand that quality is the baseline for success. So if you don't have quality production, you will not be successful, period. And you might, kind of limp along for a couple of years. I think we're kind of seeing that fallout right now in the industry, too, where, people have been making fine products for two decades, or making mediocre products for 2 decades. And they had a market that was captured. I mean, they were in the scene before anybody else was. They were the only option. And then they just became complacent because they were always successful and didn't innovate, didn't make sure that their quality was top notch, didn't invest in quality. And then we're seeing some of these shut down, which is unfortunate because a lot of these brands have this amazing legacy behind them, right? And story that I think is really important to keep sharing with the craft beer world. So it's always kind of hurts my soul when I see these breweries shut down, or even downsize. But it's a living, breathing market. You've got to adapt. You got to pivot, and you can't just say, "Well, my brand's done well in the past. It's going to do well in the future."
Yeah. I think could have a whole discussion on sort of having that clarity of vision, but also being nimble. But that's for another day. For now, I'll just
Yes.
say thank you again so much, Greg, for sharing your time and expertise with our audience. And thank you to
Yeah.
everybody for tuning in.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for the time.
Yes, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Chris. This was wonderful as always. And I want to thank everyone who has joined us today. You will receive an email with a link to the recording. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. We do hope to see you at our next session. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye now.